Welcome to Thrashcast episode 9. And tonight I'm going to be your host. So I'm Ken. And along with me for this ride is my partners in crime, Billy and Jim. And how are you both doing tonight, guys?
Very good.
Awesome. This is an
Awesome.
exciting one.
Yes, sir. It is very much so. So right at the top here, we'll just announce that we are doing Celtic Frost. And we decided to do to Mega Therion. And yeah, Billy's got it right there. So it is a seminal, I guess, black thrash death metal album classic. But we'll get into the heart of the album tonight and have a good discussion about Tom and the band. But before we do, let's just dive here into a little bit of housekeeping where you can find us. You can find us at www.horrormetalsounds.com. You can also find us on YouTube, and that would be Horror Metal Sounds at KenG.2864. And you can also find an audio version of our podcast on Spotify. So there's lots of places to find us. So now that we got all the that out of the way, we'll start with our newskeeping items this week. I don't really have much to say, but I'm hoping that Billy and Jim here have something to offer. So Billy, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so in terms of wood spinning, so I've been hooked on this is a band I've loved for many years. Not too well known. It's an Australian band called Taramis. And so basically they really only have two albums. So I only have it on CD. So the first one is called I don't know if that comes through here. Queen of Thieves from 1987. And then part two, because you can still buy this today. It's there are two albums on one CD. You can buy it on Amazon. This one's called Stretch of the Imagination from 1991. But this is really a fantastic mix of like technical prog, thrash and speed metal, really right up my alley. Hard to define, to be honest, but so like I said, not well known. I mean, the first album is a little more thrashier. The second album's a little more on the progressive side. But I mean, the musicianship's fantastic. The guitar work and bass lines. It's like the bass is a main instrument in this thing. And of course, with like most technical thrash, the vocals tend to be in the upper higher end range. So as long as you're good with that, but again, the songwriting's just fantastic. I think I played each of these albums about 3 times in the last couple of days. Cool. Just excellent stuff. Again, another criminally underrated band. So encourage people to check that out. And then just one quick news item on the tour front, not exactly on the thrash side, but a tour I'm looking forward to announce today. Amorphis and Dark Tranquility are coming to the US and Canada September and October. So, the bands both are a little more mellow these days, but still, I think they're still putting out some good material. And so I've got to see them a few times over the years. So looking forward to that again, September, October, US and Toronto.
And the last Amorphis album was phenomenal.
I liked it. Yeah. And may as well throw it in here while we're talking tours. We were talking about it offline. Or I don't know, Jim, if that was one of your news items. Was it?
It's okay. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Was the right now I'm having a mind blank. What Accept and what?
KK Priest.
Oh yeah. So that's coming to US and Canada as well. So I think that'll be pretty cool. It's funny, we were just talking about it and we couldn't remember the asset part of it, and now I forgot the KK's Priest. But okay, so yeah, that's it for me. And sorry, Jim, if you were going to cover that.
Yeah, no worries. Hey, it's all good. And you know what? The new Accept album and the new KK Priest album, is freaking phenomenal. Accept album, I think, was released a week ago, and I've just been spinning it like crazy. It's really, really good. But what I've been spinning since, man, I can't stop spinning Heathen after our podcast, and nice. I picked up a couple of albums, and the one that I was missing is this one right here, Empire of the Blind. I mean, I didn't have it. I think it was rated as my fourth, so it was rated as my last when I did it. And man, this album is just growing on me big time, and I'm so glad I picked it up. I got to admit, I spent so much time on the older albums that this one here was definitely overlooked. And I said during the podcast that I would definitely check it out and pick it up more. But I picked that up a couple of weeks ago, and I have just been spinning it like crazy. And I mean, you know what? Obviously, getting ready for the podcast, tons of Celtic Frost. Well, the three big albums I really, really like. So I'm not giving away any of my ratings, but that's where I'm at there. But that's all I've got this week, guys.
So, Jim, given you've had some time to spend with Empire of the Blind, could you see that moving from fourth to third, or not really?
I could, yeah. And also, too, because I think maybe was one of you guys had it as third, I think. So
I had it last.
It would have been me. I think I had it as third.
Yeah, and I can see now why. I didn't spend enough time with it, and I think I probably just, it's the newest one, and it's not as legendary as some of the other ones, but it's got some wicked tunes on it. And you know what, Billy? In a couple weeks, or is it next weekend? I think you're going to see them at Milwaukee Metal Fest.
Yeah, they're there. Yeah, the Friday's lineup.
Friday,
yeah, be cool.
Yeah. Oh man, that would be wicked. So, oh man, I can't stop spinning it. It's like that's what I love about these podcasts is you kind of dust off something maybe you haven't heard in a while, or you pick up maybe a little bit of a deeper album, even though that's their newest album, and you really get attached to it. And I think that's what I love about doing this, and what I love about listening to podcasts and album reviews and stuff, because it gets you to really think about what you're, kind of go in. And I'm a completist. I was always missing this, so I'm so glad I got it.
Cool. All right. Well, it's funny, Jim. I'm going to tie you into my news item because we were talking about earlier in the week. The new Schrapnel album is coming out.
Nice.
I know you mentioned it, and when you posted that video, I was like, I totally forgot about them, to be honest. I have a couple of their earlier albums, and after I watched the video, I went back to hear some of their ones. I'm like, oh yeah, I know these guys. So they're from the UK, been around since I think 2012. They will be releasing their fourth record, called In Gravity, on May 31st on Candlelight Records. So they do have a video for the album, or for one of the songs on the album, up now. You can go check them out on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you find your music these days. And it's pretty solid stuff. Pretty solid stuff. And so that was the only item I had for this week. But so Jim, what did you like it? Did you really get into the song?
Oh yeah, well I got the promo for the album. So
Right.
The album is kick ass. So I got to admit I wasn't familiar with them, and then when I got it sent to me, and then I just threw it on, and I was like, oh man, what is this? And I've actually ordered two of their older albums off of Amazon, waiting for them to come in. Oh yeah, because I went back and I looked at some of their, listened to some of their older stuff, and what a kick-ass band. I love UK thrash, UK death metal. It's just, I find it's got its own sound, and I really, really like it. It's really good stuff. And the single that's released is really, really good. And I think it's going to be a half decent. Like, I think people are going to be really excited once they get a couple more releases out.
Do you know the band Silosis?
Yes, I've heard of those.
They remind me a little bit of Silosis at times.
Yeah.
Josh Middleton. Yeah, it sort of reminds me of his band Silosis. I don't know, it's just where I find a lot of the modern UK thrash out bands are all sort of in a similar vein and style. But I mean, hopefully it'll be a really good album. I've got the promo myself. I haven't actually had the chance to listen to the promo yet, but I'm looking forward to hearing it because I sort of like forgot about them, and it's like, oh yes, Schrapnel. It's weird.
Yeah.
But there's so much music. Sometimes you can't take
There's
it
no
all
way.
in and remember it all, right?
There's no way.
Yeah, I
There's
know.
no
That's
way.
what I mean. That's what I'm saying. It's like I totally was like I don't know. It's weird, but anyways. So, all right. So I guess that's our news items for this week. I only had the one, but so with that all getting out of the way, we'll talk briefly about our main topic tonight, which is Celtic Frost. So I'll just do a quick band bio, and then we'll. I've got a couple questions to ask you guys, just to talk about the band's history and stuff. So Celtic Frost, as a band, they did form in the mid 1980s, formed by Thomas Gabriel Warrior and Eric Martin Ain. Now they actually were in a band called Hellhammer previously, which is pretty primitive and probably not the best written music at all, heavy and aggressive for the most part. That band disbanded, and then they quickly, like within months, formed Celtic Frost, and they had lofty ambitions right from the get-go. So the band is credited for sort of, I guess, having early styles of black, death, doom. They kind of sort of started it all, and of course the thrash elements in their sound. So they're an incredible band for what for the influences they've had on metal from that period and moving forward. And I don't think no other band sounded like them at the time. I can't think of any album from 1984, 1985 to even sound remotely similar to Celtic Frost. So the one thing about the band that I do appreciate is the fact that they've never been one to rest on their laurels. They've always changing every album. So they've of course added avant-garde elements into their sound. It's been I guess, but for some people it could be considered a detraction from the music, because there are some people who don't like the more avant-garde style, and there's some that just want more the the black and the death sound. But you're either going to fall in two camps with the band. I fall in the later camp. I'm really more into the progressive avant-garde style myself, but everyone has their point of entry and how they feel about the band Celtic Frost. So before we dive into their first album, I'm going to ask you guys some questions. And the first basic question that I wanted to pose to you both is, do you consider them a thrash band? Let's start with you, Jim.
I kind of, they're man, they cover so many genres. I consider them maybe a blackened thrash or even a doom thrash. I find they've got a really good doom sound to them, and that's what attracted me. I know that for death metal and black metal, these guys, along with bands like Venom and that, were really highly influential, especially in the early kind of building of the black metal genre. And I think you hit it on the head when you talked about their avant-garde sort of kind of recipe they have to their albums. Not to get into each album, but like by the time they hit their third album, I thought they were really changing things up quite a bit. And really kind of they didn't care what was popular or what metal was popular. They weren't until maybe an album later, which we'll talk about. But I find they just kind of went in their own direction, and that's what I love about them. And I'd consider them a blackened thrash band, but definitely with massive doom elements. I mean, it's just so cool, and just I remember, not to take away from the question, but the first time I saw them was I saw the video for Circle of the Tyrants on like the Much Music Power Hour. And I remember me and my buddies were like, it was almost the same feeling of the first time I saw Voivod's War and Pain videos where they came out with the gas masks. And I was like looking for something different. And that's where Celtic Frost came in for me. I saw that video and I was like, this is so cool. They played live on that. And then they were, guys and fans jumping off the stage, people with corpse paint on, people with upside down crosses on their heads, and I just was totally right off the bat kind of interested in them. And that's and I haven't looked back. I mean, I love Tom G. Warrior, and I got to watch some interviews with him and where a lot of this came from, where he was when he was just a young kid. he's, you know, from Switzerland. He's there and he's living in a small town, and he realized I'm different than all the other musicians and stuff around. And that's where he gained a lot of this stuff going forward. And I thought it was good. And, you know, it just, yeah, I would consider it a black and thrash for me.
Okay, cool. How about you, Billy?
Yeah, it's. I think. I mean, I'll start with saying they're just such a hard band to define, right? You guys
Yeah.
have kind of hit on that, right? We almost do them injustice by trying to define them, right? I'm sure Tom would give a shit for trying to define them, but I mean, and it's I have an interesting relationship with the band because I'm a latecomer to Celtic Frost. I always heard of them for years. I had a friend who had like the patch on his jacket when I was young, and so I always knew about it. But where I discovered them was actually Obituary doing the cover of Circle of Tyrants, where it really like hooked with me, right? Like on their Cause of Death album, and that was 1990. So it was like, wait a minute here, and obviously my musical taste had matured since like 85, 84, 85 when their early music was out. But I mean, that's a bit of a backstory. But to my ears, again, like you guys hit it. They're a combo of death and black and doom metal and even traditional metal and avant-garde metal and as we'll find out at one point, like hair metal. And sleaze metal, and so they're all over the place. But to get to the question, I mean, there's definitely thrash elements, right? The album we're going to talk about today, there's definitely some parts where they let it rip and get good and thrashy. But but I never said when I list out typical definition of thrash band, Celtic Frost would never actually be something on my list, just because there's so many other things at the same time.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. But similar to you, Billy, my introduction to Celtic Frost came through a buddy of mine when I was in high school. So this is when Into the Pandemonium came out. He gave me he recorded a copy on a cassette and gave it to me and said, "Here, listen, yeah, that's it. Listen to this." And I heard it and I was blown away. I played it nonstop. I just couldn't stop playing it. And I found it creepy. The La Lune, the song La Lune, where you get the operatic singer, that creeped the hell out of me when I was like, wow, because you get these creepy violins, the horns, it's really, really creepy. So that was my first introduction to the band, and I think that's why I've always been a proponent of leaning towards the avant-garde style, because that's where I first heard them, and it left such an impression on me. I think you guys are both right. Like it's definitely proto thrash is what I would call them mostly. But you know what makes them unique for me is the introduction, or at least of like the doom elements, some death that you do get in there, and the black metal. So I think it works, and they were able to kind of like throw it all into a cauldron, mix it all around, and then you get this interesting sound that I don't think any other band at the time had, and I think that's what makes them really unique. That's why I've always liked them. And I have to say, Tom's vocals, he's got to be the most unique vocalist in the history of metal. The oohs, the ahs, this guy.
His signature move.
Exactly. Yeah. He had it all in the sound, and it's so unique. No other vocalist in metal, whatever genre you want to call, had that style. So it made Celtic Frost a very, very unique band. But that's kind of how I always interpret the band at the start when I first got into them. But well, yeah.
You know what, Ken? I think unique is the big thing, because they sound nothing like each other, but I have them on the same plane as Voivod, because when you think about, I mean, they sound nothing similar. So it's not a sound thing. It's just maybe an individualistic thing where you like the band Enslaved, for instance, they love Voivod. They love Celtic Frost. I find they're synonymous with where they go through, like when people talk about, you know, what drove them and what bands they were into, and a lot of black metal and a lot of death metal. I find those two band names, you know, Celtic Frost, Voivod, always kind of come in together. And I think it's just the individualistic you know, the sound that they both created. You know, you've got this, like you said, with Tom's voice, vocals, and then by the third album, total avant-garde. And then you had with Voivod, kind of the off kind of tune guitars, which was done on purpose. And, you know, you've got Snake's vocals there that are just absolutely amazing and different in their own way. So I find they're very similar in that end, that they were both kind of, I guess, both kind of doing their own thing regardless of what was happening, and so many bands picked up on that. I thought that was pretty cool, and I don't think there's a band out there, like you guys said, that sound like this. I don't think there's a band out there that sounds like Voivod, so you know.
No, you're right about that. They were unique. I mean, I could see the comparisons to Voivod. You know, early Voivod is, you know, it's like, what do you want to call it? Thrash, punk, hardcore. It's got everything thrown in there, and I don't think anyone sounded like them either. They have, and you know, this will tie into my next question. The visual aspect of Voivod is unique because of his artistic abilities with the band. But at the same time, I'm going to preface that by saying the same with Celtic Frost, because I think that Tom, as an individual person, not just as a musician, his love for art sort of helped I guess, create that early image or visual style to Celtic Frost. So the next question I wanted to ask both of you is, what do you think of how Tom visualized the band? Let's start with you, Billy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it was really just like the music, kind of groundbreaking, right? I mean, you look at I mean, we already showed it, right? The album artwork. I mean, we know this is the Geiger artwork here, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later. But like, it was stunning, right? Like, it just really attracts, but it perfectly matches the music. Like, this is freaking doomy, and like it was perfect. But you know, like, some bands would sort of use this as a cover, right? Like a gimmick to use the album artwork to get you to buy it. You know, I pulled out this from the Celtic Frost box set. I don't know if you guys, I highly recommend this, but it's a beautiful hardcover book. The photography is incredible. But again, the image of the band, I mean, you know, that was probably one of the things, like I said, I discovered them later when I was a bit more mature in my musical journey, but I would look at this and run. Just thinking that this is like nonsense, right? But like, this band, they didn't need this image, right? The music was groundbreaking. It was exceptional. They weren't trying to use the image, the artwork, the band's image as sort of a bait and switch, right? Buy the album and it's garbage inside. So I think the artwork is equally brilliant to their musical talent, and a perfect match to the style, really.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good. That's a really good point about their earlier style, where they started from. Jim, what do you think about that their imagery?
Oh, absolutely love it. I mean, their live album, their Emperor's Return, which is on the picture here. I mean, you know what? This, by the way, is the re-release. It's kind of done like a book, and I know you guys all have it and that. I got the CD, but it's got so much great imagery in it. And I mean, when I bought the cassette, I had to order it through, I think, Sam the Record Man in like downtown Halifax. So I did it over the phone and then got my dad to drive me down there. And then when they saw it, my parents were like, what the hell is this? But, you know, they were pretty cool and didn't care. So I brought it to school, and, you know, I think I got it taken away from me by my teacher, and my mother had to call and get it released back to me anyways, because, you know, it was pretty hardcore for back then. But I got to be honest, I heard the music first and then saw the band and thought, oh my God, what is this? It's almost like mesmerizing. And then the artwork just goes along with it. I mean, Into the Pandemonium's another great. I mean, the artwork on that is just phenomenal. And I think Tom's vision with it, as Billy said, matches the music. It keeps it, it's not, there's nothing fake about this on these albums at all. It's these early albums. This is what they wanted you to see, and this is what they sounded like to me. And I got to be honest, like there's a lot of, like Billy said, there's a lot of bands out there that would put something on there that would get your attention just to buy it. I honestly don't think Tom Warrior even cared if anybody bought it. He's like, this was done for them, man, and their fans, and that's what I love. And you know, as we'll talk about the catalog as we go on, there's times where he may have lost a little bit of control there, trying to, because they got so popular from these first albums. So, but anyways, no, I think the artwork is just augments the album. It just goes hand in hand.
Oh yeah, I agree. And it's obvious that he's an art lover. Now, when you were looking at Into the Pandemonium, that is a Hieronymus Bosch painting, and it's actually a detail from the Garden of Earthly Delights, which is an excellent painting. So you could see that by using art, like classic art on the covers, is kind of unique, because I don't know too many metal bands that were doing that back then, like in the 80s. And then, you know, if you consider like the Geiger cover, I mean, Geiger was obviously one of his favorite painters. And interesting to know that he actually developed a good relationship with Geiger over the years, up to the point where he was actually working, where Geiger paid him to work in his office to help him catalog paintings and help manage his affairs, which was interesting. So I know when Geiger died a few years ago, it really affected Tom. Tom was not only did he lose Martinine, because Eric Martinine passed away as well, Geiger passed away. So two of his closest, I would, confidants or chums passed away, and that kind of really has a powerful impact on people or as a person. But I think I think the art's always been important. And Billy, you were holding up the Emperor's Return Morbid Tales album cover. That cover was actually done by Philip Lavier, and we discussed Philip a few weeks back because he did the earlier Creator album covers. So I can see there's always good art, or at least idea of good art on a lot of those covers. Yeah, and then that's great. That's the shield, shield logo, which was actually designed by one of their sound producers. I think his name was Horst something. Don't remember his name, but yeah. So it's always been interesting that they've had Horst Mueller is the one that you were showing there, Jim. That was produced by Horst Mueller. He was the producer on Mega Therion. So it's kind of neat that they've always had really, really good ideas for art for cover. So I think so obviously Tom was well aware of the image of the band, and pretty much, I think, and it's funny because so many other black metal bands, I know a lot of black metal bands, especially in Norway, were heavily inspired by Celtic Frost. So so I could see that. So the imagery is very, very important to the band. So, but it's great. I love all the artistic connections that Celtic Frost have in the music and to Tom's personal life. So,
and isn't Tom still, like, I saw an interview with him, in the last 2 years, I think he's like the co-curator of the Geiger Museum right now.
Yes, he is. Yes.
So he takes that very seriously.
Nice.
Yeah, that apparently was one of Geiger's last wishes before he passed away.
Yeah.
So he had asked Tom to do that. So Tom, obviously they formed a really close friendship in later years. So yeah, Tom you're right, Billy. That's a really, really good point. So it's interesting. So we're still talking about Tom here. So the last question I wanted to mention was, what do you think of Tom now? Now he's got a new band, Triptykon, and I know you both have heard the albums that they've put out. What do you guys think about them? Jim, let's start with you.
I like them. I think it's a natural progression. There's a part of me, I'm always like a purist to some degree, where I want bands to live on forever because, I just want to relive those days and where I first heard it and that sort of thing. But I kind of happy the way, I think they finished. I think Celtic Frost finished on top, and I think he put that chapter kind of to bed, and then he's gone on to his other some other things. And I like Triptykon. I think it's great, and it's kind of morphed into something different. But I'm glad that he didn't put out more albums that might be like kind of waning off and waning off. You know, they have such an interesting catalog, and we're going to get into it when we look at all the albums. But like, you know, like Billy was saying, you've got everything from doom, thrash, black metal, avant-garde to progressive black metal to, I would call it, to even like some kind of hair metal. And it's kind of neat, the progression. And I think as much as fans were divided on some of the albums, I think that, you know, it's part of their history. And then to break in with the newer band, I think it's glad it doesn't, to me, it doesn't sound like Celtic Frost. So I'm kind of happy about that. I guess, if that makes sense. I know I'd want to hold on to it, but I think Celtic Frost is special in its own rights, and I think Triptykon is special in its own right as well. So it's kind of nice to have two separate entities there.
Okay. And what about you, Billy?
Yeah, so interesting. The maybe I'll just start by saying like how much respect I have for Tom before we get to the Triptykon thing, because Triptykon, he's doing exactly what he wants to do, right? Like in his eyes, Celtic Frost, Hellhammer's officially done, right? Especially after Martin died, like that's not even up for debate, right? Even when he was going around doing like Hellhammer songs, he was using like a different name, right? Because he refused to let the audience think this is Hellhammer. So again, he's groundbreaking. He's legendary. We talked about it. What I love most about Tom, he's the most humble man you'll ever talk to, right? Not that I talk or see in an interview, right? Like basically, you know, if someone calls him an artist, he'll be very strict to say he's no artist, right? He got lucky. He's doing this by the good graces of fans, and he really doesn't believe he has talent, which is quite shocking, because that's definitely not the case in any way. And so, you know, I just wanted to sort of preface that, right? The man's like a genius, right? Like every black metal, death metal, all the unique bands are always going to cite Tom and Celtic Frost. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there, because for me, Triptykon's not my favorite. I much prefer Celtic Frost body of work. I mean, I have the two full-length Triptykon albums. It's heavy, like it's doomy for sure. But when I listen to them, I always want them to go into the next gear. Like I wanted to get a little bit faster, right? So that's the kind of thing for me. You know, the chugging riffs are still there for sure, which is cool. But then I have very little of Tom's signature death grunge, right? Maybe I'm living too far in the past, and I think the rankings will reveal, but it leans a bit too heavy on the ambient and atmospheric side for me. So that's just a personal taste thing. But again, nothing but 100% respect for the man. I think metal. I mean, if there was a metal like Hall of Fame, he'd be like one of the first people in there. So, but I'm not the biggest like Triptykon fan.
Okay, well, I am. I like both albums.
Which is cool.
I like them quite a bit. I do appreciate the ambient style. I do like the doom. I like the fact that it's a lot harsher. It is more or less an extension of Monotheist to some degree. A lot of what you heard in Monotheist pretty much spills over into Aspirianta Daemons and Malena Chasmata. So that's the two albums they put out, 2010, 2014. They're both great albums. What I like about them is just the people that he's, I guess, surrounded himself with. V Centura from Dark Fortress is in the band, and V Centura is apparently very integral to the new sound. He's actually helped Tom produce a lot of the Frost remasters that came out the last few years. So I think it's kind of cool that maybe he's not Eric, maybe he's not Martin Eric Ain, but he's found another person, another like creative soul to hitch his wagon to help push the sound now. So I like that. I like the fact that it's experimental. It's dark, it's heavy, it works for me. You're right, Billy. It's not necessarily Celtic Frost, and maybe you might prefer that kind of style, which I think people still do. But I like the fact that he's kind of an artist who doesn't rest on his laurels. He's like, well,
No, for
I'm
sure.
gonna move forward, because I think that's always been the argument with a lot of favorite bands that we have. Like Metallica always gets the same bullshit argument. Oh, they suck today. Well, they don't suck today. They just don't play the style that they played, and nor should they.
Exactly.
You shouldn't be playing that stuff when you're like a 50, 60-year-old man. You would evolve. Well, I think the same can be said for Tom. He's obviously evolved as a person and as a musician, and I like it. Although, just to go back to one of your earlier points, Billy, they had been playing as Triptykon. They had been playing Celtic Frost tunes on the last couple of tours. So I think it's cool that he still throws the songs in there. But you're right. I don't think he'll ever fully acknowledge Celtic Frost again as a band, because that's a part of his life that's died, right? Like, it's done. He's not ever going to return to it, and he probably shouldn't. It would be such cheesy to like, I'm going to resurrect Celtic Frost. Why would you do that? Like,
Oh yeah.
an honor to the band, you know?
Yeah, like there's I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but for any fans, you should check it out. Like there's like a 1 hour interview of him on YouTube, and
Okay.
it's actually with a writer from Norway, and he basically gives his views of everything that we're talking about today. And it's just like what he talked about, like to use the Celtic Frost name would be him ripping off the fans for money, right? Like again, he has so much integrity and like and honesty, and he's just really is a good person. It's pretty crazy. And like he said, Triptykon, he's doing exactly what he wants to do. He loves it. It's what he's doing. He said he's not a man of like means. Like he doesn't need more money. Like he's fine with what he has. So he's just going to do what he wants to do, and he's happy doing it.
And the box set that was released a year or two ago was, I wanted to get it, but I've got most of the albums, and I kind of, it was really cool. I saw him do the interview on the box set, and they were asking him why some albums are in there and some albums aren't, and it was just he said, I'm releasing this for the fans. It was always about the fans. And I think that's really, really cool that he always speaks of the fans with that much admiration, because especially we all know, a lot of bands just releasing stuff now just for a bit of a money grab, or just, and it's kind of sad in a way, but I love that. And that's really, really, it's really, really cool.
Yeah, he came across one of the best interviews I've seen with any musician in any style of music.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I seen another one of his earlier interviews after Geiger died, and he was he was completely, you could tell he was like he was beside himself, because that was like one of his best, like, again, he likes to hitch himself up to that creative soul to, I guess, to work off of. And when Geiger died, you could see like probably a part of him died with him. So it's kind of sad, but I mean, the thing is, Tom has persevered, he's moved on, and he's still making music, and that's the important part. So before we get into the the album itself, just one other quick question: have any of you guys seen Celtic Frost live at all? No.
Really? No.
Okay.
I've seen many bands, but I haven't seen Celtic Frost.
Okay, nope. I did see them in 2006 on Monotheist. So they did play Toronto, and it was a really, really good show. I can't even remember most of it now, but I do remember that it was a really, really good show. And he did play some of the classic Frost songs, and a good selection of songs from Monotheist. But that was the only time I've ever seen the band. And sadly, not long after that tour, they broke up, because I guess Tom was fighting with Martin. He was also fighting with the drummer, Marco Sessa. It was very cryptic, because he kept on saying that there were people that were trying to take away what he was trying to achieve. And I don't know what he meant by that, but obviously there was some inner band turmoil with the members.
You talked about it,
Yeah. It was really, really cryptic, but I always thought from what he'd said that the drummer was the integral reason why the band broke up, but I don't know. But that's just, you read all these articles online. But
Yeah, he just
anyways,
said when he was speaking in the interview, he just talked about inner turmoil in the band and
right,
disagreements with other members.
right. But I thought there was one point in one article I read, he was kind of pointing out
Maybe.
to Marcos as a, but I don't know. Anyways, it's not important. Whatever. So, okay, so now on to the main topic of our evening, and that is going to be To Mega Therion by Celtic Frost. It is Greek. It means the great beast, and I guess this is the great beast of an album, right? So
Oh yeah.
all the songs are killer songs from start to finish. So again, on this album, you do have Thomas Gabriel Warrior as the main songwriter, vocalist, and guitarist. You do have drummer Reed St. Mark, who's had a good history with the band, and also I think for the most part Dominic Steiner is credited as the bass on the majority of songs, but I also know that there are a bunch of songs written and I think performed by Martin as well, from my understanding.
Yeah,
But
tracks I think 2 and 3.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, which he wrote, and then and he helped had a part in writing, and was wrote all the bass parts. Okay, cool. So let's start us off tonight for this album. This is a monster of an album. We'll start with song number 1, and that's "The Innocence of Wrath." And Jim, what do you think of the opener?
Oh, I like it. I mean, this just sets the theme of the album. And I mean, here we have an instrumental, and I couldn't get what the sound was until I actually had to look it up. It's a French horn, I believe, that's on it. And it makes this kind of ominous horror film sound. Like, it sounds like it could be it's not as jumpy as like a John Carpenter thing, but it would be cool in a really kind of maybe an old school horror flick. I love it. It's got awesome drums on it. It feels like the start of a horror film for me, and it's so doom sounding. It's wicked. I mean, I love it, and it kind of sets. You're picking up this album with this cover. That's what you want to hear as your first, and I think putting a instrumental on there right from the start, nothing wrong with that. I think it's just over a minute long, but I could have stood. It could have been longer for me. It's that cool of a starting track.
Okay, cool. And Billy?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Jim kind of hit it, right? It sets the tone for the album. It's, it's dark, it's ominous, it sounds evil, and it's really cool, right? The orchestration, right? Like, being a fan of some classical music, I recognize the French horn and, that sort of drum. Those are the timpani drums,
Yeah.
the big drums with the stick with the big piece of felt on the end. And yeah, those are two perfect dark instruments, right? Like the classical orchestras that get deep and dark use those same tones, right? So I mean, in a way, that probably influenced what Tom was doing with some of this. He was probably listening to some of that music from the 1800s. But yeah, no, great opening track. Only a minute, but it sets the stage.
Oh yeah, for sure. I almost feel like it's 80s fantasy kind of a Conan soundtrack, because a lot of the lyrics on this album are very much like dark fantasy for sure. So that's where I sort of thought it felt like to me. The horns are actually credited to Wolf Bender, who did the horns on this album. So it's great. It's not what you would expect on I guess a metal record back at this time, but certainly you're right. It does set up what's to come next. And
but it works.
And of course it works. Yeah, for sure. And it sets up the next song perfectly. The Usurper. Billy, what do you think of Usurper?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a classic Celtic Frost track. It's so good. And it's funny, like we've been getting into deep, like, albums on the last few podcasts with like 10-minute songs and eight. So most of
Yeah,
the songs we're going to talk about today are much shorter. This is like barely over 3 minutes. But yeah, it's great. It kicks off with my favorite Tom move, right? The death grunt, right? Like, kicks this track off. It's a simple technique, vocal technique, but I love it, right? Every time he does it, like it puts a smile on my face. I mean, this is going to appear on most of the songs, but it's the massive riffs, those dark chugging riffs on this album that are fantastic. And it's also slightly catchy at times, but I often think when I hear this, like, I mean, it's probably Jim. You said like black and thrash, but
Mhm.
I think like death and roll or black and roll as kind of a terminology that always comes to my mind. I mean, it's clear how he influenced like black metal and doom metal, and like with a song like this and the whole damn album. But love the operatic female vocals.
yeah.
Uh, Again, we talked about the French horns, the timpani drums. Now we got female opera vocals on like what could be considered a black metal album. So cool. Some great guitar work, lead work from Tom, and the song mixes up the pace really well. So for 3 minutes, I'm 100% locked in and engaged. Love it.
Yeah, for sure. The the operatic falsetto voice is by Claudia Maria Mulcree, who is credited as doing all the vocals. But that's something Tom is always liked to include in the albums, which some of the other later albums. So I think it's kind of neat. And then just one to your point, Billy, about the ooze. I'm not sure if you guys notice it, but I find that the oohs are signify a tempo change every time he does the ooh. Then you get like this, you get a riff that's either like heavy or like lower. Like I noticed it, like it seems to be like a device he uses. It's unique because I don't know
It's
any
good
other
points. Yeah,
no
good.
other no other vocalist who would use it, who would do the oomph, and then you'd get the tempo, like you get this quick tempo right after. So it's almost like he's saying, "Yeah, here comes the tempo." I like it. I think it works. It's just something that I found interesting. But how about you, Jim? What do you think of the song?
I love it. I mean, I think this would be my like. It's got a really cool tempo. It's got a wicked guitar solo in it, and I mean, I think it's black metal with clean vocals, like, and maybe a little bit more kind of not much better musicianship in a lot of cases than a lot of you get the distortion from black metal. You don't have that here, and I can really see where they get this from. I mean, this is one of the hits, one of the greatest hits for Celtic Frost. I mean, the Usurpers, like one of their main songs, and you can see. I classify it as black metal with clean, clear vocals, and the musicianship is just that much better. I'm not crapping on black metal at all. It's just like some of the earlier black metal that you hear, with a lot of the distortion in that. This is kind of almost really for its time somewhat distorted free, and that's the first thing that I think of it. And the ooh, I mean, come on, that's like signature, and I
Mhm.
never thought about it that way, but yeah, it kind of maybe a little bit of a something's coming, a directional change,
Mhm.
or whatever. But no, it's a kick-ass track. It's one of my it's a great track on the album. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and it's dark. It's like dark, primordial thrash.
Yeah.
The other thing that I know that this apparently is a storyline that Tom may have crafted in his spare time. So he's basically wrote the story about a character, an unnamed character who apparently is like he's like a malevolent ruler looking for power, and he rebels in the idea of like bloodshed, human suffering, and sacrifice. So that's kind of interesting that the song there is like a literary connection as to what I don't know if it's like a story he wrote, but supposedly it is one of his storylines that he used to create the song. So that's kind of interesting. And oddly enough, the next song ties into this with
Oh,
the
really?
same with the same storyline that apparently he's wrote. I don't know. I was looking it up to see if I could find out did he like publish a short story, but there was no further information. But apparently, the next song, Jewel Throne, is similar to the Usurper. So, what do you think of that, Billy?
Yeah, no, I mean another great track. I mean, this is going to sound repetitive, but those heavy chugging riffs, right? They're just stupid good. This is a quicker paced track relative to the first. Like what stands out to me is there's some really like interesting guitar lines that just sort of fall in on the music that at first seem really out of place, but after you've heard them a bit, it seems perfectly natural to put them there. But it's not like a lead section. It's just all of a sudden you'll have like a like it'll just be in it, right? So that's kind of cool. Love the fast section that kicks in around the halfway mark. This gets into, I think your point, Ken, is a thrash. Like this gets thrashy during that part. And just want to call out like Reed St. Mark, the drummer, right? Like, I mean, this man, like, they found him in the US, right? In the New York area. And the man had never played a touch of metal in his life. The guy's a jazz drummer, and that's all he ever played, right? So he had to learn like metal and keep up with the band from scratch. And so I think that's pretty cool. Like he does a great job keeping time with all the time changes and the speed. So he fits right in there. I mean, I love his drum work on the album. Yeah, just another great track, very memorable. Fits in nicely with the previous track. It's good stuff.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great song. And Jim, what are your thoughts about it?
Oh, this is one of my favorite tracks. Like,
Okay.
I kind of wrote down that it starts off with a faster Doom tempo, which is kind of weird because typically Doom isn't fast. But at 150, the song just takes off like a minute 50 seconds, and it gets, it goes so fast, so fast, so fast. And then at exactly 2 minutes 36, that guitar solo just kicks in, and it is heavy, and it goes right to almost 3:30. So you almost have a minute of that super heavy chugging guitar, and then around 3:30, just before the song's ending, it kind of calms down a little bit. So it takes you on this whole sort of a journey through the song. I think it's one of the best songs on the album.
Yeah, for sure. Like there's a lot of raw thrash energy. There's a lot of alternating tempos. It's raw sounding, and those riffs, those like buzzsaw kind of riffs. I mean, that's what he's known for in all his music. That never changes. Tom's never really changed in that part
No.
of his guitar playing, which is why I like stuff going beyond this. But as I was mentioning earlier, though, again, it's from another storyline. I don't know if it's the same storyline, but he has an unnamed protagonist who apparently is a king, and he's looking for, again, maybe this might be something that you'll see often as a trope here on the album. He's looking to gain power. So it's interesting. I think these might be a lot of more or less like dark fantasy tropes that you would find in dark fantasy. So I just find it interesting that the two songs kind of go hand in hand. But it is a really, really good song for sure. It's a staple Celtic Frost song for sure. All right, so we'll go to track number 4, and that is Dawn of Mega Therion. And Jim, what do you think of it?
This could be my 1A, 1B. This is another kick-ass song. I mean, the vocals are really haunting on this. It's got kind of the sound of like a big band. I mean, it's doomier again, but it's got that slow, sludgy sound. The bass sounds great in it. At about 120, she starts to pick up again, like a minute 20 into it, and you get that galloping. It's just the galloping guitars just gets going. It's definitely got a thrash vibe for me. And at 350, you've got that wicked guitar solo. And I mean, I think this is the signature sound. These two songs just are so. I mean, that's you could define Celtic Frost with these two songs. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff on this album and other albums, but these two songs just do it for me big time.
Okay, cool. And Billy, how about yourself?
Yeah, it's one of my like top three songs on the album. To me, it's like one of their best examples of like early doom metal or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim said sludge metal, right? Like that's what this track is. Once again, like influencing another whole genre of music. But this, I mean, again, like the orchestration comes back, right? The orchestration combined with the heavy grinding guitars are so cool. You get the drums are back. The timpani drums are back on this track. The slow, super thick riffs. I mean, it's not hard to see how Obituary was influenced by these guys.
Yeah.
Slowly We Rot album, right? And I know Trevor has been like has always been clear that Tom is a major influence on him as well. So that's cool. This has got all the tempo changes, as Jim said. We got fast parts, the slow grind, but then the dark and evil orchestration sections all coming together. It just really works well. And I think someone said it, but again, like I really appreciate when there's like extreme music like this, and maybe this is not as extreme as what we get today, like in terms of extreme death or black metal. But I always love that you could decipher Tom's vocals, right? Like it just adds like a lot to the music to me. And Tom's got one or two good guitar solos in here too. It's funny, like I mean, Tom is such a he'll say that the band's very important, but the man does so much, right? He's doing the brilliant guitar work and the vocals are the two best things about the band. Then I think he writes most of the lyrics.
Yeah.
I mean, the man is Celtic Frost.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this song goes hand in hand with the first two because it Megaditto, if I'm saying that right, refers to like a mythical battlefield. Now, I don't know if this is anything in particular, but it's a mythical battlefield where there's like apocalyptic visions, and you will also, if you're there, you'll encounter like biblical prophecies. So it's kind of interesting. It's really cool, these lyrics, and I don't know. I mean, yeah, they're very often on albums like this. They're cryptic and quite possibly more poetic, but this is what I think makes the song so great is because you get these lyrics that are dark and evil and it just goes along with the music that accompanies it. So I think it's fantastic.
And it's
All right.
almost
Yeah.
it's almost 6 minutes. So it's
Yeah.
like, you're already kind of hitting like one of the longer songs on the album. And I think it just, the length of the song is really important to this track because it gets it kind of, again, these songs take you on a journey. I think that's so cool.
Right. And as Billy was just saying, there's like all these like interesting sections that are like fast, slow, like there's that slow burn opening with the doomy parts. That's kind of like almost sounds like a funeral march at times. And then you get all this and you get the crazy shit afterwards. So yeah, it's a song for 6 minutes. It doesn't feel like 6 minutes,
No.
but it's great. It is a really good song. All right, so we'll go to track number 5, Eternal Summer. And Jim, what do you think of it?
It's another good song. I mean, it's got that cool drum and guitar intro. It's got a really fast groove to it. I like it. It's got some good melodic parts to it. And again, like I keep throwing times out there because it's so evident. You can almost timestamp what happens and when. At 2:20, that guitar solo just rips. And I mean, it's absolutely wicked. I think I've said that like on the past 4 songs that, there's this timestamp of a guitar solo and it's just so good. But it's a great song. I mean, it's leading up to the big hit on the album. So maybe it could possibly be overshadowed a little bit because the next song is such a, it's one that, one of their big hits. But I think it's a great, great track. And I love the placement of it on the album.
Cool. And what about you, Billy?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good track. Like it's probably the one or two that would be my least. I mean, this thing's sitting in between Circle of Tyrants, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but the track number 4, so I'll screw it up for sure. But yeah, so it's got, I mean, it's sort of bookended with 2 of the best songs on the album. So it's just a little bit more straightforward, compared to, we're not getting any of the orchestration, we're not getting any of the avant-garde stuff or the different vocals, but still, I think it's a strong track. I think this is one of the drum tracks. Like as I listen to it, like Reed does a good job. There's some cool drum fills and cymbal work, probably coming
Mhm.
from his jazz background that comes through here. And as Jim said, the solo kind of really stands out. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good, strong track. But again, its placing makes it appear more inferior than perhaps it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good song. I don't mind it. I like the alternating tempos, the raw thrash. Lots of energy on the song. I like the song. It's I see your point that it's not as memorable as some of the others, but it's not a
Still
bad
good.
song either.
Yeah.
It's not a bad song either. Okay, so the big track that we'll be talking about next, and I'm just going to preface this before we start. I'll go to you first, Billy, but I just wanted to say this is where I was mentioning the ooze and
Mhm.
the tempo change, because I started noticing it here for sure. Like, oh, this is interesting. So we'll start with Circle of Tyrants, and Billy, what do you think?
Yeah, I know. So this is, probably my favorite song by Celtic Frost, if I'm honest, and one of my favorite like heavy metal songs. I already talked about this is how I ultimately discovered the band, but I won't go back there. But again, this for me. So you talked about the vocals, Ken. What again? Tom's brilliant here, and there's a really interesting like effect he uses on the vocals. It's this like echoing effect on the vocals that is so effective. Like I love it when he does that, and then the voice rings out like behind his initial
Yep.
words. Like I mean that's like makes a big part of the track, but this is like songwriting brilliance. I mean the riffs and the drumming that closely follows the riffs, like the pounding drum beats. It sort of sets this like dark sort of evil like image, and it is so good. Yeah, and then you kind of got in the background like you've got that I don't know, I guess it's a devil voice or something
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
making like the track even more evil and spooky, and it's also just a ridiculously catchy track. So it's 100% impossible to not headbang to Circle of the Tyrant. It's so
Yep.
damn good.
Would agree. I totally. And Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is again just like Billy. This is the song that got me into Celtic Frost. I mean, I saw it, the video, and the energy in the video with the live crowd, and just it was like I remember seeing it and I just saying, "What the hell is this?" And the lo-fi sound with it, and just the guitar and the drums and the vocals. It's one of my favorite metal songs as well. And I mean, if we did a top 50 or top 20 list, I'm sure it would be in there. And it's so recognizable as soon as you hear it, and that Circle of the Tyrants, and then it just changes up. And I mean, I absolutely love it. It's a great, and all I wrote on it was just awesome. That's all I wrote. And when I saw that, the video was done, and I love when it starts going into sort of the double bass pound, and then on the video it shows the shield, and the strobe lights are going off of it, and it's just very kind of hypnotic in a way too. It's such a cool track, and I mean, you think about it. I think I saw this probably in 1986 and maybe 1987. I'm not quite sure when I totally 1986 maybe. And I remember seeing the video, and me and my buddies just like, what the hell is this? And that's when we started kind of checking them out. And I mean, that this was the song that led to it all. And I don't think it was ever released as a single, but I consider it
No.
a single. It should have been released as a single, and maybe even the next song put as a B-side, because it's a great song, and it's like the most identifiable. The Usurper. I mean, these are massive hits for Celtic Frost.
See, again, though, it's from a storyline that he's credited as, I guess, writing. And he's talking about a group of tyrants who come back from a battle. They're all from a victorious battle, and they decide that this battle is going to push them, I guess, forward in their respective kingdoms and how they rule with like an iron fist. So it's interesting. So it's like clearly there's a dark fantasy element to this album that makes it unique. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people like it. So yeah, but it's a song that everyone remembers. It probably will be. I'm sure in most rankings, if people did like a song ranking for Celtic Frost, this would be number one.
Oh yeah,
I'm positive. I couldn't see this being lower than that. But yeah, it's a great song for sure. Now we'll go to track number 7, Beyond the North Winds. And Jim, what do you think?
I like this song. I think it's I think if there was a song that was going to be played on the radio, this would be it. Mm-hmm. And I think it would have made a great B-side for Circle of the Tyrants. Like if they released it as a single, and maybe, because it's got that great guitar and drum intro again, but it's got a really groovy vocal vibe. And again, another smashing guitar solo, but I find it's got a really upbeat tempo with it. And I like it goes kind of maybe a little bit in the opposite direction of some of the songs we've been listening to and talking about. And I kind of like that. And I think it would be kind of maybe a yin and yang thing with Circle of the Tyrants if they were to release that as a single. That would have been really, really cool, I think. But no, it's a good song. Good song for sure.
Cool. And what about you, Billy?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good one. This would be my other sort of least favorite, perhaps on the album. The songwriting is a little bit more straightforward, but I see what Jim's saying for sure. I mean, the galloping riffs are all pretty cool on the track, and it's only a 3-minute song, but halfway point, Tom just lets it rip with a solo, right? It just may be one of his longest solos on the album, and it's on like a short little 3-minute song. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I think it's a good song, but again, it just doesn't have the sheer variety and mass that some of the other songs have, but still good.
Yeah, believe it or not, this is actually considered one of the more uplifting songs by Celtic Frost. It is. It's considering that the lyrics, because they're very poetic here, so they can be interpretive in many ways. But you get the idea that there's a mystical realm, and if you go there, you're going to find solace, and you're going to find a deeper understanding of oneself. So, I mean, that's one interpretation that I read, and I can see that. So, maybe it's good to have one uplifting song on this album. I don't mind it. It's okay. I'm like you, Billy. I think it's all right. Like, it's an okay song, but it's not one I would go back to many, many times. So we'll go to track number 8, which is Fainted Eyes. And Billy, what do you think of this song?
Yeah, so I like this one more. It's a much faster paced song. Again, back to your question, this at the beginning, this shows some thrash elements for sure. I even get some like Motorhead vibes at times on this track as well. I mean, just everything. It's more of the same, to be honest, right? Like comes like killer vocal delivery, the amazing riff hooks. But again, I love the quicker pace on this thing. There's some great leads, and it's just such a good rhythmic track, right? It's just that nonstop like galloping speed, and one of the more aggressive songs. So it fits well. It's a good mix with the rest of the stuff, I think.
I like Reed's drumming on this one too. I think it's like as Jim would say, it's a drum track. Like it's the drumming. The drums are really strong on this one. At least I found for me.
Yeah, true.
But okay. So Jim, what do you? Let's hear your thoughts about the song.
Well, I think this and the next song both have kind of a different guitar sound to me. More of parts of it have kind of a little bit of an industrial metal sound. So that's what I get from it. But I can see where Billy gets a Motorhead vibe from it, definitely. And yeah, it is a drum track. Another solid track for sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's a good song. I mean, there's a lot of like there's the tempo thrusts up and like it goes fast and it goes slow. The drumming is exceptional. There's a clink a clinking sound in the background that I
Mhm.
wasn't able to like decipher, but I thought that was quite interesting. So there's maybe that's what you're attributing to the industrial parts to
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. I can kind of see that. I was a big industrial metal fan in the 90s. So I went to many, many, many shows. So you can
Mhm.
see that what I appreciate with this band is the start of stuff like this, where you're getting elements of maybe industrial metal, but kind of before it became a big thing in the 90s. But yeah,
Yeah.
it certainly gives the song an added like dimension that makes it interesting. Okay, so we'll go to the I guess in my mind the most interesting track on here, "Tears in a Prophet's Dreams." What do you think, Billy?
Yeah, so definitely different, right? Like very atmospheric and very avant-garde, which we'll see more of on the next album in particular. But yeah, I mean, I think it just further sets the mood of the album. I mean, the dark and evil mood comes in here. I mean, this is crazy stuff. We probably said this already, but who the hell was doing this in 1985, right? On
Yeah.
like a metal
Yeah,
album and looking the way the band looked. I mean, it was it's pretty crazy, but like, I mean, I don't mind it. And I probably revealed some of this early. Like, I'm less a fan of some of the more avant-garde stuff they did. So for me, like, I think it fits well, like, especially leading up to track number 10. I think it does a good job there. But I mean, it's also something that if it wasn't there, I wouldn't be like overly disappointed either. So, yeah.
okay, cool. And Jim?
I think this is like a dab, maybe a foot into the Pandemonium album. I think this
Yes,
one
yes,
could have easily fit on that album. Like
yes.
it would not be, and I don't think it's out of place here. I think the band Tom was probably trying to. I mean, it's more ambient. It's pretty cool. It's got a lot of weird different sounds. I wrote a weird cool intro with the lots of the cymbals. It
Yeah,
just sounds really really neat. It's definitely like a prelim into the Pandemonium, and I think that's really really cool. I think they're man, they are just covering every genre of metal, and I mean, why not just throw this in there as well too, like the kitchen sink, and I think in this and even the next song, boy, it goes into like you've got Into the Pandemonium, the next album, and it's like leading up to it with these two songs. Not to give the last song away, but
mhm,
that's how I feel. You know.
mhm. Yeah. No, I would agree. Like, that's what I wrote in my notes too. Is that this is a precursor to what you would be getting with the next album for sure. Like
Yeah.
you can hear the progressive avant-garde style in here. Horst Mueller, their producer on the album, he was the one that's credited for the sound effects on this song. So like there's mechanical clicking in the background, which is hard to decipher, but you hear it. So that's where I think it sort of attributes to the whole industrial metal sound, like a Nine Inch Nails before Nine Inch
Yeah.
Nails kind of thing. So that makes it interesting. The other gentleman who's also credited for the sound effects is Urs Sprenger, who apparently worked with did some album artwork here. He did their Shield logo on some of the earlier ones. So it's interesting that they hired these two or worked with these two gentlemen on the song for the sound effects. And I also read that Horst, as a producer, worked on a lot of European free jazz in the 90s. So that I think that's kind of an interesting connection to the whole kind of avant-garde style that this band brings in their music. But I like this song. I think it's quite interesting. Okay, so the big song on the album after this is song number 10, Necromantical Screams. What do you think, Jim?
I like it. I think it's one of the best songs on the album. This would be my top 3 or 4. I'm probably on 4 now. Throw Circle of the Tyrants in there. It's got that operatic kind of sound to it going on, mixed with a doom. Then at around the 4-minute mark, I love the screaming guitars. And it's got a good, cool bass ending to it, which is really, really neat. And it's got a great beat. There's so much going on with this song. And I think it's a
Yeah.
continuation of song 9. and it's again a preliminary. I keep saying it for Into the Pandemonium, which is definitely has some different elements to it as well. And I think all I can say about Celtic Frost with all the metal genres they cover, and this song again covers all of it, is just the experimentation is just it's mind blowing. And with this track is just experimentation right to the end. It's got a great they do a tremendous job with it. It's one of my favorite songs on the album, and a great way to end off the album, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And you, Billy?
Yeah, so although I wasn't a big fan of the previous track, I love this track. So for me, it's my third or fourth favorite track. I mean, this thing just sort of rips right out of the gate, but it's also, I mean, Jim alluded to it. There's many layers and complexity to this track, right? So I appreciate it because it's sort of a bit on the prog side with its epicness for sure. But again, I got to call out the haunting female vocals are back. Right, so it just contrasts so well with Tom's like harsh delivery. Like I love it. Again, we got all the chugging, amazing guitar riffs here. We've already said that, but I think one of the first times I could say I could clearly hear dedicated bass lines in this song. Right, like I think on a lot of the album, the bass is playing along with Tom, so it doesn't come out. But here you actually can hear it. It's very clear. And then again, the really cool French horns and the timpani drums are back again. And again, although some of the pure atmospheric stuff I'm not a fan of, and that's also why I'm not a fan of black metal, I do appreciate when he experiments and brings in like classical elements or unusual elements. It's just for me when it ends up being like 100% like ambient song, that's where I kind of get lost. So something like number 9. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of musical peaks in this song. Crescendos that come like 3 or 4 times. The intensity just peaks and then it comes back down. Like I love the song, even though I may not be the biggest fan of this particular style.
Okay. The other point that I think I pointed, or at least want to point out, is how the song fades out with the feedback and the guitars. I thought that's a nice little cool like outro that works for the song. This song is also another dark song because it's generally the lyrics are about death and trying to comprehend the meaning of death. So I mean, like it's a perfect kind of song that fits this album or the theme of the album overall. And I think what Jim said was right. It's a great way to end the album off, and also, as we've stated, also for a lot of reasons, you can tell that this is like a signifying the change to what you got Into the Pandemonium for sure. The last 2 tracks for sure. So it's kind of interesting where it starts and where it ends, where you get a more raw sound, aggressive, speedy, and then you get this last 2 songs where they're changing direction a little bit more avant-garde. So I think it's kind of interesting how the album begins and how the album ends. So it's great. It's a really, really good album. I understand why people consider this to be like basically their favorite Frost album. So yeah, I get it, but it's great. It's a great album. And so out of a ranking, if we did a ranking, what would you guys give it? Like a 10, I would assume.
Yeah,
I think although there's 1 or 2 songs I'm not the biggest fan of, the good tracks are so damn good. Yeah, I would give it a 10.
Okay, all right. I figured I would give it a 10 too, even though it's not my favorite album of theirs, but I would still give it a 10 for sure. You can't. It's like an OG album. It's an OG album, like we were talking last week about Bonded by Blood. That's an OG thrash record. Like you can't. That's the start of it. I consider this album the start of something too. Like you can't not tell me that this doesn't start off all these other genres like black metal, specifically black metal, death, doom. So it's quite interesting for sure.
Yep.
All right, so that will wrap up our portion of the album dissection. From here, we decided to do an album ranking of the band. So we're looking at six studio albums that we're going to rank. And Jim, why don't you start us off?
Okay. So I'll do 6-1. How's that?
Sure. Go for it.
Okay. So my 6th is Cold Lake. And I know, I'm going to get, and I know Cold Lake has a lot of fans. It's just, I remember buying this. And when I bought it, I remember this was back in the day when you couldn't stream anything to find out what it, obviously cheat and find out exactly. I just assumed this was going to be more the same of, Celtic Frost that I love. And well, it wasn't for me. And I got to be honest, I should have held on to my CD or cassette. I can't remember what I had at the time because, it's out of print. I'm hoping,
It goes for big bucks now, actually.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I'm a completist, so I really want to get it on CD, and
Yeah.
I'm looking for used copies online just so I can put it with my group there. But it's just I don't know. Tom, and I guess we'll debate this later, and I'll go through my things, but he doesn't consider it a Celtic Frost album, so either do I. But I can appreciate the fact that there are a lot of fans out there who actually do like it. And this and my 5th pick, Vanity Nemesis, the Heart Beneath is a good song on it, but this was kind of, they were selling this off as they've returned back from here, and I didn't kind of get that feeling from Cold Lake, so I was a little disappointed with this one too. But you know what? I think there was a lot of change going on. They got really popular after the 3rd album, so I think that they wanted to maybe put something out there, and a lot of bands were doing this at the time, where they were sort of appeasing the record company, and Tom has spoke very openly that he never wanted to do that. He didn't want to do it, but against his judgment, he felt that he did it, and that's what it was all about. So, he said that he will never release it as a set that he authorizes, but he says he can't control the record company and what they'll do. And he brought up the fact after I'm dead and gone, they'll probably release it all and whatever. And but I got to admit, I was kind of disappointed with the box set that this wasn't part of it. As much as I'm not keen on it, again, being a completist, I do want to have the whole catalog. So my number 4, Monotheist, I love that album. That album's actually the return of Celtic Frost in my mind. That could even be, God, that sometimes I like it as even my 2nd. I mean, it's a really good album. A Dying God Coming into Human Flesh is a wicked, wicked song. I just think it was a great ending to a great, they did those 2 albums, and they came out with this, and then that was pretty much it. So, I kind of glad that they did return to where I felt was more of their form. Number 3, Into the Pandemonium, great album. This is a really experimental album for me, and I really thought that I can't believe they released Cold Lake after this. Like, they went from this to Cold Lake, and it really bothered me because this was such an experimental, darker, so much going on with it, almost like a masterpiece in my mind of not very, I don't know how it did commercially, but I know the first 3 albums were gaining a lot of momentum, especially in North America. So that's my number 3. Number 2 would be to Mega Therion. I mean, I love this album. It could easily, it's a 10 for me, but my number 1's got to be Morbid Tales. And I love the fact that, Morbid Tales came out with, it was an EP originally when it was released, and then for the North American audience, they decided to bring it up to a full-length album, which was kind of neat. And I love the sound of the original. You get the sound quality's not as good. I mean, there's almost like a jump to the 2nd album, and I kind of like that rawness. And there's a lot of great songs on here. Dethroned Emperor, I mean, is an amazing song. And so that's my pick. And I believe on my top 50 albums that we did at Christmas time for the Metal Pit, this was my number 37 on that list. So
Okay, cool.
it made my top 50 albums of all time. So definitely my favorite. But I mean, the 2nd albums were that's where I found them and had to go back through. So I could
Yeah.
interchange those two at any time, and I'm not taking anything away from Into the Pandemonium. That is
Mhm.
a mark of an album for sure. So.
Cool. Okay. And Billy, how about you? What's your ranking today?
Okay, cool. So I didn't have a chance to pull out all my props, so I'm just going to flip through this here. I have the box set, but they're all like stuck in there.
Okay.
But yeah, so for number 6, same as Jim, Cold Lake. I mean, so I still remember getting this and hearing it, and the minute you turn it around and look at the picture of the band, you knew
Yeah.
something was wrong, right? Like the not only the music, but the image is there. So the album was a shock. Like I swear, if you go in the dictionary and look up career suicide, that album cover is what you're going to see in the definition. Like whether people like it or not, like I mean, Tom says it himself. It just killed the band, all the momentum. Like that's just
Yeah.
fact. Right. So that
It
was
backfired.
Tom. It's interesting. He blames his girlfriend as the influence for how he ended up with this album. Right. So I found that kind of interesting in the interview. I remember the again this amazing interview I was talking about. You know, the host said to him, "I actually like it," and Tom just basically put his hand up and said, "Stop! It's a complete piece of shit. Like I'm not even going to talk about it." Like I mean, his hatred for
Fair.
it is just is incredible. But I mean, that being said, there's things I don't mind, right? Like if this was packaged up under a different name, like and not being pawned off as like Celtic Frost, then maybe it'd be easier for people to adapt to, right? The glam and sleaze was just too much of a directional shift. But there's still some cool riffs. But for me, it's Tom's vocals. He just
Yeah.
can't. That's the weakest part. Like he can't sing this kind of music. So I don't know. But again, not so again, I can appreciate many parts, certain parts of it, because I also like glam metal.
Sure.
But again, for Celtic Frost, this was a no-no. So this is probably controversial for me, and it's a tale of like I view this album in two halves. Parts of it I absolutely love, and parts of it like I can't express how much I hate. So like my number 5 is Into the Pandemonium.
Okay.
So for me, some of the strongest songs are amongst the best things they've done. But there's other stuff. They just take the avant-garde too far. So like certain tracks like Mesmerized, One in Their Pride, I Won't Dance, or the Tristesses de la Lune, like it's just not for me. And although Tristesse has a woman singing, but
I love that song.
the rest of those bad songs, it's Tom. Like Tom's whining vocal, like I just can't stand it. Like there's no way about it. His singing went from his like dark, tone to whining. Like he's whining in the vocals. And I'm
Okay.
not the only one who thinks that. Like that's like pretty broadly out there when you look at reviews. So, but then again, there's about 50% of the songs I totally love, like Inner Sanctum and Babylon Fell, and Caress into Oblivion. Like I love the songs, and those are obviously more of the older style, right? So yeah, that's kind of where I stand. So I either love it or I hate it. And the Mexican radio cover, like I don't know, why are you starting out an album with a cover? Like when you're as innovative of this band is, and you're going to take a cover as your album opener, like again, that's just like another strike for me. But then for number 4, I go into Vanity Nemesis, and I actually like it. I think it is a good strong rebound. It's not going back to their earliest sound for sure. So I agree with Jim's there. I mean, unfortunately, the band's credibility still largely shot here.
Yeah.
So it's not going to get a lot of promo, but there is some thrash. It's still got some of the gothic sound that we saw from the previous album, some traditional metal, but no glam, right? So that's a good thing. I mean, I would argue this album should have probably followed Into the Pandemonium. That would have made more sense to me, rather.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Full lake, right? But there's lots of tracks I like. Like I like the two title tracks at the end of the album. I think Jim may have mentioned "Heart Beneath." I like that.
Yeah, it's a good song.
"Pain in
Yeah,
My
yeah.
Hand" I think is good, and "Wings of Solitude." So
Yeah.
I like that album. And number three for me is Monotheist. So I do think that's a bit more of being, true to the older style. It's really heavy, also very doomy. So we talked a bit about it. Like I could see how this, leads up to Triptykon, but like where I said, the one thing that I find here, they do pick up the pace a lot more on this album than they do with Triptykon. So that's probably why I like this more than I like Triptykon. But the amazing riff work and the songwriting's all back on this record. I think it was their best since the earlier days, and so yeah, I'm a big fan of this record. Number two for me is Morbid Tales. Agree with Jim on everything, but for me, it's kind of it's the roughness and the rawness that puts it number two for me, despite being all the classic songs on here. So my same position that I had last week with Bonded by Blood, just to the roughness of it all, pushed it down a little bit. And this of course is interesting because Morbid Tales was in itself an EP, and for us who live in North America, this was patched up with Emperor's Return and later re-release as a full album. So but yeah, I'm a big fan. That's my number two. So not surprising, there's only one left. So to Mega Therion's my favorite album, and again, I think we already talked about it. So but again, just a great combination of progressive, experimental, but also still having all the original Morbid Tales sound in there as well, taking it one step further, and better musicians and better production. So that's my number one.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Well, this will be interesting because I'm onto an island all by myself on
I
this
had a
one, guys.
feeling.
But that's okay. I mean, everyone has their tastes.
Yeah.
Now, like before we start, I'll say that none of the albums are bad. I like them all, really, at the end of the day. So even if I have a number six, it doesn't mean the album is bad. Like, so Morbid Tales to me is number six. And I like the album. There's a lot of great songs on it. It like you said, Billy, it's raw. It's not as defined as when they get onto Mega Therion, but I like it. I just it doesn't captivate me as much as some of the other albums. Number five, I have To Mega Therion, and that might be a blasphemy to many people.
Oh, wow.
I'm surprised.
Well, no, again, guys, I like it. I mean, listening to it over the weekend, I realized this is a damn good album.
Yeah.
But I guess it's just when you come into music and something that affects you, that's how it is. It affects you, and that's what you remember the most. And that's just what happens to me with this band. Number four is Vanity Nemesis. Yeah, this is a good album. It's like I said, I guess they did hurt their reputation, so it's not quite the return. Although there's a lot of new band members on this album too, like Priestley on drums. There's Kurt Victor Bryan on bass. There's a lot of different people playing here, so it's not quite the classic Celtic Frost sound. I like it though. There's a lot of really good songs, like The Heart Beneath. I think is a great song. Wings of Solitude, Phallic Tantrum, Vanity, Nemesis. Those are all great songs. I do like this album, but I see how it did hurt their momentum, even though they tried, but it just didn't work. Number three, I have Monotheist. Monotheist is a really good album. I think it's the return album to the band. It's a lot harsher. It's a lot nastier. It's dark. It's heavy. It's doomy. The vocals are so shrill at times. Tom is like, no oohs and ahs here. This is a whole different version of Tom that we're not used to. But yeah, this got great songs. A Dying God Coming into Human Flesh is what a great song.
Yeah.
Progeny, Domain of Decay, Drown in Ashes. Wow. This album, when I bought this album, it blew me away. I was like, oh, I didn't even know the album was coming out. It's so weird. I walked in the record store, there it was, and I was like, what? Celtic Frost? Really? I bought it, and yeah, I loved it to death and still do. I play it a lot. Number two is Cold Lake. For me, I know what you guys are saying about it. I understand that it's momentum killer. It's a weird album to come out after Into the Pandemonium, but I don't know. There's something about it that caught my attention. I think like Cherry Orchards. I love that song. It was catchy enough for me that I played it over and over and over. And it kind of came out at a time when I was reading comics and DC Comics released Neil Gaiman's Sandman, which is a great kind of goth kind of comic. And I don't know, when that album came out, I was reading that comic, so it just for whatever reason it felt like a soundtrack to me for that book I was reading. So I love the album. I get it. I understand why Tom hates it, but I don't think it's all that bad. And I'm going to disagree with you, Billy, on the vocals. I actually don't mind Tom's vocals here. They kind of work. I understand. Yeah, they work. I don't mind them. I like Seduce Me Tonight, Petty Obsession. They're basic songs like Juices Like Wine. Yeah, he's repeating the same chorus over and over and over. So I can see how that would annoy people. But I don't know. For whatever reasons, it clicked to me. I'll defend it every time someone asks me about it. I really like the album a lot.
But Ken,
and of course, yeah.
Maybe if the cherry orchards had a demon somewhere in it, it would have made me really happy.
I get that. Sure.
All right.
No worries. I mean, I get it. Even that video is basic. It's shot in black and white. I don't know if they're thinking Metallica 1 or whatever when it came out. But it's not great. I will admit the video sucks. It's awful. It's just those guys all standing around playing. It's like, okay. But whatever. I mean, it's gonna always have a love-hate relationship, I think, with most Frost fans for sure. And number one to me is Into the Pandemonium. Now I like the change in sound. It's funny what you said, Billy, about the opening song, Mexican Radio. I mean, it is an odd choice. I will admit, like as an opening song, why is that there? I agree with you, but overall, I like it. I like the avant-garde approach. I like the La Lune song. I love the fact that there's a female vocalist. When I first heard it, I thought it creeped me out. It just, for whatever reason, I was like, what the hell? And this is in the mid 80s when it came out. So, I mean, I'm like, whoa, it blew me away. I loved it. It just had a creepiness to it. And I like the fact that the cover is, a detail from the Garden of Earthly Delights. I think that's so great. I've always identified with it. Babylon Fell is a fantastic song. I like Caress into Bolivian.
Agree.
Yeah, it's got some great stuff. I mean, maybe not every song works. And okay, yeah, Tom starts the vocal style. When you mentioned the idea of the strained, I almost think it's tortured. I looked at he's trying for this kind of tortured vocal style, which is weird. It might be off-putting to some. Again, for me, Billy, I'll disagree. I liked it. It worked for me. I didn't have a problem with it. And I think maybe it's just this is my entry into Frost. It's the first album that I actually heard. And I guess for me, it stuck with me. It's the one I play the most and the one I like. But that's my ranking overall. So a lot different from you guys, but But like I said, none of these albums are bad in any way. No matter where you put them in your ranking, they're all good albums. They've never released a bad album. In my mind, I know you guys will disagree with Cold Lake, but I've always felt that every album was a progress into something else. And that's what makes them a unique band. And I hope they never, ever return to Frost. That's done. Move on. You got Triptykon.
Well, I wonder if Tom owns the masters, and that's why, or is it the record company under his wishes are just not repressing like Cold Lake? Because he was very I think I saw the same interview as Billy, and he was very like adamant. It's one of the first things they brought up when they brought up the box set. And the interviewer did say he actually liked it. And Martin Popoff actually rated the album, I think, 8 out of 10. And he liked it. So, there is a lot. I see a lot like online. I see a lot of love for it. I just can't get into it. I think it was the shock, like Billy said. You turn that album over and you're like, is this Winger? Like, where's the scariness? And that's what, I think it was too much in a different direction. I just couldn't handle it. And Billy makes a great point. And I think that's the same thing with maybe even the self-titled Motley Crue album, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, totally apples and oranges here, but I think if it was under a different name of a band, it probably would have been a lot more well received. Like if that Motley Crue, that Karabi album, which I think he's a better singer than Vince Neil any day of the week. Had that been another band, I think it would have done really well and maybe even catapulted him into a bigger stardom with, I mean, Karabi's a great vocalist, but I think with this album too, Billy's right. If it was another band, because I don't mind glam or hair metal either. I don't mind it. You know, I'd probably be like, oh, okay. But it's just, I think it was just the name Celtic Frost on there. And just the fact that the font of the front album changed, I don't know. It just was, everything just kind of got to me. So.
And for a man like Tom, who was at the forefront of like creating everything, this is kind of like just saying, forget all that, and I'm going to copy something that was popular.
Yeah.
Well,
feels weird.
Yeah, that's true. But I know, to your point, Billy, about his girlfriend pressured him into making the music. But I also read that the record label had a really strong hand in pushing the sound to a more like mainstream kind of commercial approach. So I think the label should take part responsibility in coercing Tom into making this album, I would think.
But there's no way. I mean, there's no way labels wouldn't have been on him like for going avant-garde like all the way.
Yeah,
that's not common in metal. Like he basically put his like big boy pants on and said no, right? Like there's no way he let the record label influence. So why this time? And now he had all the power of success behind him, right? So if anything, he had his best bargaining power.
You're right. I would agree. Yeah, there's a strong argument to being opposed against making that record. I would agree. I mean, you do Into the Pandemonium, it's great, and then all of a sudden you veer off to the left with this. It's like, what are you doing? I mean, I get it, but at the time for me, it's just, it came out, it just clicked, it just resonated with me, and I've stuck with it for what it is. I mean, I recognize, like both of you, that okay, it's a betrayal. Some people, I guess, longtime fans think of it as a betrayal in sound and style and visual. We were discussing with to Mega Therion and where they started and where they went. But you can't fault people for trying. It didn't work, obviously, and they did go back to Vanity Nemesis and tried there, and that didn't entirely work either. But
I'm wondering if he had a falling out too, because I know for Monothice, they changed record labels. So it was Combat and Noise for the first albums right up until, and then Monothice. I'm wondering if just, after Vanity Nemesis, maybe the credibility of the band with the label, and he just wanted to kind of, okay, we need to start from like press a reset button kind of. I wonder. I mean, it kind of feels like that. But like, yeah, I feel like, Cold Lake is the new Coke of, when they brought out New Coke versus Classic Coke. But anyways.
Well, we're missing one album in between though. He did an album called a band called Apollonian Sun, which he was a part of before Monotheist.
Yeah.
So I've heard it. That album is okay. It's sort of, I don't know, it's weird. It's kind of like avant-garde, it's metal, but to your point about Cold Lake, if that's what they would have called Cold Lake Apollonian Sun, that album, like as a band, maybe it would have worked. I don't know. Like, to me, if I hear Apollonian Sun and you got Cold Lake, people might actually be a bit more responsive to it, I would think. But I mean, what are you going to do? You can't hang yourself for something you did. Artists will make not it. Like, let's be honest, every artist that we know has made a shit album. Metallica's made a shit album. So I mean, like, it's just part of life. You're not going to make an album that's going to be like revered. It happens, right?
And Tom admitted it, right? Like he said, the mistake, right? So, but he just doesn't want to talk about it.
No, I saw that interviews too, and he's like, no, we're not talking about it, and that's fine. He's going to stick to his guns, and I respect that. Whatever, maybe he'll change his mind before he dies. I don't know. Maybe
Well,
it'll just
I'd like a re-release just so I can get it. I don't want
yeah.
to pay, I don't want to pay $100 for a CD, but I just for my collection of Celtic Frost, I'd like to have
Yeah.
it. And I kicked myself. I think I gave it away, or I don't even know what I did with it when I bought it. It would have been on cassette probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyways, I wasn't one for that would have been what, 1988. I wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
I was still in high school. I wasn't one for just pissing away $10 on a cassette, and throwing it away. I just wish I still had it. But anyways, I'd love to have. I would have liked it in the box set, to be honest. I was a little disappointed, just because, I and I just kind of wanted it in there. So, but who knows what'll happen in the future? Yeah.
It's funny. It's very much like the first couple Pantera albums.
Yes.
Mm.
Right, the
Actually, good
band
call.
Yes.
feels the same way. I mean, I had to get the vinyl through Europe through bootlegs
Yeah.
because again, the band's just never going to release it, right? They've
No.
totally disowned it, right? So
That makes sense. That makes sense. I still have my cassette for Cold Lake. Actually, I've never got rid of it. But to your point about that, though, Jim, years later, I wanted to get it on CD. I always had a cassette, and yeah, the prices way back when I bought it were insane on eBay.
Oh, yeah.
They're crazy. I found
Yeah.
one I actually was able to find a used copy on eBay, which I still have and will never get rid of it. But yeah, it's like that album goes for insane prices these days. I looked it up recently. I'm like, wow, it's like $200-$300 for CD, and I don't know what the cassette goes for. I'm sure that goes for big bucks too.
Yeah.
Because I know there are people still collect cassettes. I don't know why you would, but there are people that still love having cassettes.
Oh, yeah.
So, but yeah, it's interesting. They have a very interesting discovery for sure. And Tom will always be one of the more unique voices in metal for sure, like extreme metal, whatever you want to call him. He'll have a very, he'll be remembered with an extreme, with a very strong voice and opinion for metal.
And I don't think it hurt their reputation. Like, it hurt with fans. But I think when you hear about black metal bands and a lot of heavy metal bands that talk about them, and what they meant to them, and that nobody touches on Cold Lake, but it doesn't seem like it's held against them in that sense. So, I mean, the fans, yeah, okay, we were all a bunch of assholes. We were like, what the hell is this? But, that's how it goes, and that's what happens. But, I find that the bands that really looked up to them and that, and you never hear an interview with a black metal band that says, and then they brought out Cold Lake. Never. It's just not even brought up. And Billy makes a good point. It's like Pantera, where they erased the first part of their whole catalog. It's just been totally erased. I always thought Cowboys was their first album. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I don't mind the first couple albums. I actually don't mind the vocalist. It's a different style, of course, but
Yeah.
But I don't mind it. I mean,
I agree.
what's that, Billy?
No, I agree with you, Ken.
Yeah.
I like the that's why I went and got the European bootlegs, because I had to get them.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, just different style, but I don't mind the vocalist. I like the songs on those first couple of records, but a band has a right to do what they want, right? Some bands will
their music.
Some bands will acknowledge their past, and some don't want to. Like we always harp on Metallica. They don't care. They don't really want to go back to their past. They do at times, but they're never gonna embrace Master of Puppets ever again. It's obvious that you'll never get that, or even Justice ever again. They're done. They moved on, and it sucks. It sucks for fans, because fans, you gravitate towards a certain band, a certain style, and you love it. And then when that band changes, it's like you feel betrayed. So I get it. I understand why Cold Lake is hated. I could see that from that. I mean, I've read a lot of articles and reviews online about it. Yeah, I get it. It's a betrayal to a lot of people. But I also see it from an artistic point of view that, well, you're an artist, you make a change. Whether it works, that's to be debated. But that's the whole point of being an artist, right? To try something different and go out there. It doesn't always work, but anyways, that's my thoughts about it. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap up tonight?
No.
No.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, good conversation again.
Absolutely. And Tom is a worthy gentleman to talk about for sure.
Absolutely.
So before we head out tonight, we will say that our next podcast will be sort of a retrospective on a modern thrash album. We were talking about doing some modern thrash to go, relatively more last decade or so. So we decided to discuss Havoc. So instead of picking an individual album, we're going to discuss all their albums. So what we'll do is we'll briefly go over each album, talk about what we think about it, and possibly maybe even discuss other modern thrash albums if we have time. Because I don't think it's going to be an hour and a half of discussion on Havoc. They don't have enough albums to do that. But we'll be bringing everyone here who listens to our podcast something on modern thrash.
Awesome.
Cool.
Absolutely. Okay. With that being said, guys, let's call it a night, and we'll see you all next Friday.
Great.
Good night.
Night.